finishes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. This is going to be a great one. We have three thought leaders that I know are going to give us a ton of information, expertise, insights, and so on. But what we're talking about today is Nerf guns and a rack of ribs, customer gifts that cut through the noise. Okay, so we all know that sales is getting quite challenging. How are we getting to our prospects? And we're going to dive into all of that today. Super excited. But before I introduce our panelists, I just want to thank all of you for joining us. We do all these events for the community. So thank you for taking the time to rock with us today. But super excited to dive into it. Another thing, this is being recorded. So if you have to hop off for any reason, any way, shape, or form, go put out a fire or whatever it is, no need to worry. It'll be in your inbox within 24 hours. So if you need to, revisit something, share with your peers, leadership, whatever it is, no need to worry there. Most importantly, so if you look at the bottom of your screen, there'll be a tab for the Q&A. Make sure you're asking all your questions in the Q&A. This is a workshop, right? So we want to answer as many of the questions that you guys have. And this is your chance to ask these three thought leaders those burning questions, okay? Also, in the chat, let us know who you are, your role, maybe a LinkedIn profile for any networking purposes, where you're calling in from. We love to know and see where everyone's coming in from. So get the chat going. We want a lot of banter, ideas, opinions in there. So let us know who you are. One more thing, at the bottom of your screen on the chat, there'll be a little blue bubble. Change that from whatever it says on your screen to everyone. Reason being is because now the whole panel will be able to see the Q&A as well as the chat. So if there's anything that I miss or they want to answer something directly, it's on top of mind, they can just attack that. Awesome. Okay, so without further ado, I would love to welcome our amazing panelists. Kris, Jake, and Becc, thank you so much for giving us 45 minutes to an hour of your time today. I know it's a long time, especially in the sales world. So thank you so much for joining us and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar.
Thank you very much, Mikey. Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, okay, before we dive into the juice, I do like to get a bit more of an introduction from the three of you, just so we can get a bit more acquainted with the audience. Becc, I'll start with you. Do you mind just giving us a bit of background on yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone on the line. My name is Becc. I work for a sales media and consulting company called Flip the Script with a little bit of teeth. And my background in Equip is I was an AE in Texas, oddly enough, slinging HVAC, plumbing, heating, lighting contracts, then moved out to the Bay Area. And at 30 became an SDR because I didn't understand tech and I wanted to know more. And so I saw kind of a gap between those two worlds. So got into some sales tech companies and tried to bridge the gap of what makes sense for both of those worlds in the modern prospecting world. That's it.
I'd say you didn't give yourself enough credit by saying you work for. You are the founder and CEO and the brains behind Flip the Script. So you need more credit there, Becc. You're doing some awesome work out there for the sales development community.
Thank you very much. Well, speaking of founders and CEOs, Kris.
We'll move over to Kris. Give us a bit of yourself. And Becc, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
So for those who don't know me, I'm Kris Rudeegraap, CEO and co-founder of Sendoso. For those of you who don't know what Sendoso is, we are a corporate gifting and direct mail platform, helping you send out gifts, direct mail, handwritten notes, you name it, we can send it. And before starting Sendoso, I spent about a decade in sales myself. So I was an AE, I was doing SDR work, I did everything. So I was an AE at a company called TalkDesk when I had the idea for Sendoso, and then I went from AE to CEO. The rest is history.
Kris, can I interrupt for a second? This is completely unplanned, but I actually have a gift from Sendoso on my desk that I just saw.
I love it.
Oh, I remember this because I get a lot of gifts that are quote unquote unpersonalized, like meaning a lot of people send me alcohol and I don't even drink. And y'all sent me sour gummies, which I destroy sour gummies. But this meant a lot. It will be gone in about 48 hours, but it meant a lot.
There you go.
I love it.
Awesome, Kris. Thank you so much for joining us. And last but not least, Jake, Do you
What's
mind
going
giving us
on?
a bit of background
I
of
will.
yourself there?
Good to virtually. Well, I don't really see any of you, but good to meet everyone. If I haven't met you before, I'm Jake Dunlap. I'm the CEO of Skaled Consulting. We are about a 50+ person sales RevOps consulting company. So we work with hundreds of companies every year on their sales processes, sales tech stack, outbound optimization, methodology work, et cetera. So really anything around modern sales and, building out structure and processes in both process and tech is what we do. In a previous life, I was a rep. I was back in the day, it used to be called a full cycle rep, where you had to I had to prospect, close deals, and manage accounts. I was a VP of sales, Glassdoor, and a few other companies before I started Scaled. And I'm looking forward to this topic in particular, because I think today more than ever, the days of just send all emails and, volume-based metrics are going the way of the dinosaur. So I'm pumped.
Wicked. I'm pumped too. Well, thanks, Jake. Thanks for joining us. Super excited to hear what you all have to say here. And again, remember everybody, go to the Q&A, put your questions there. It's your chance to get those answered. Okay. So to start it off, we kick off the conversation. So as I mentioned before, we all know it's getting a little bit more difficult to reach the right prospects right now. I want to hear from the three of you. What's working for you right now? Are there any favorite innovative prospecting techniques that you're using and is seen to be successful? Becc, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about pattern interrupts recently and kind of setting the sales pattern. And so I think the unique problem that I've seen in the market, which I'm sure, Jake and Kris have also seen, which I want to get your take on, is that we haven't had for, hundreds of years, is how do I stand out? Because, wind the tape back 30 or 40, 50 years ago, people drove to someone's office and they knocked on the door and they're like, hello, my name is blank. And so the pattern interrupt was that you couldn't drive to more than, 10, 15 offices. But now we can send out, 300, 400, 500 emails. And so, I've seen statistics of people are getting 200 emails for a decision maker pre-pandemic, 250 per day post-pandemic. So the first one is how do I stand out of the fold? And to me, that's standing outside of the normal sales language that normal sales reps are saying. So looking forward to it, just checking in, just circling back, just bubbling this at the top of your inbox. Happy Monday. Hope you and your kids are safe during these uncertain times. We know all the phrases quick chat, quick question, we're the number one blank that helps blank do blank. Here's our case studies, standing outside of that language so that people don't log into the email. And I'm going to kick this to the crowd. When you log in on Monday morning and your email implodes, what do? What's the first thing that you do? Kris, actually, I'm going to ask you that.
Before I even drinking my coffee, I'm swiping, getting them all out of my inbox as fast as possible.
And do you open all the ones that you delete?
Sometimes I'm just looking at the subject in the first handful of words even.
Totally.
Totally. Yeah. And so I think, emails aren't even getting opened, because we hit the normal sales pattern. It doesn't have to be a bad pattern, it just has to be, typical pattern. So I think that I've been thinking a lot about how do I stand outside of the words that most salespeople, are saying. Mm-hmm. There's only 300 of them,
I get the any thoughts on the above email all the time.
Okay.
Just to bump it up. But yeah, love that. Jake, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love what Becc said. I actually feel like the bar is so low to stand out right now that with with this much thought, the bar is so ridiculously low to stand out. And again, whether that's being relevant or personally, we talk about a lot about the difference between relevancy, which is really an understanding of what a buyer is actually doing in their job and that industry and a deep knowledge and understanding. And then there's, kind of personalization, which is the customization things that we see. And I think what we're seeing is with a very small amount of customization or relevancy, it's actually not that difficult to stand out because everyone's just hitting the send all button. Nobody's making calls anymore. And so, video, gifting, obviously, a little bit of relevancy in your email interactions, and really truly having to be, we call it like omni-channel, where different people like to consume things in different ways. We've seen LinkedIn direct DM one-to-one videos just destroy, which is when you're a first degree connection, you can use it on, so only on mobile. You can send a one-to-one video. So candidly, there's a lot of different plays, and we'll get into them. But the overall theme that I would give to anyone listening is, if you literally take 2 minutes to just go like this, you are already in the top like 5% of people that are doing outbound right now. So the bar is not as high as people think to really stand out.
One of the things I'd double down on that one too, on the personalization side, that I've seen recently and some of our reps do, is personalization with even like embedded images or GIFs or whatnot. And SDR is actually learning like Photoshop as a new skill set, or like one of those online photo editors. You don't have to get the full Photoshop suite, but I find that pretty interesting as another kind of evolution of personalization, and embedding like a really relevant image, or set of images. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I've seen, and then I think there's a comeback of like PS. I've seen prospect emails that use PS really well lately, which I find is like another way just to like put a blurb in there that maybe is not as structured of the message, but I tend to read it.
I think it's also super interesting, Jake, of what you were mentioning of like the personalization will work because the pattern, knowing them a little bit, will pattern interrupt, because the pattern is to not know them at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like roll that around in your brain for a second, that the pattern is to not know anything about them. So I couldn't advocate for what you were both saying more. And to me, gifting's a part of that, because it's a pattern interrupt in and of itself as a channel. But how do I tie, these two things of like personalization is one-to-one, equip about you. And then to your point on relevance, and I hear relevance described a lot, but to me, it means three things. And you mentioned one of them of what are my buyer personas metriced on? They metric to drive MQLs, book meetings, close one revenue, da-da-da. What's relevant to them in terms of the triggers in market, like any kind of action they've done, requested a demo, didn't schedule one, did their company IPO, did the company just receive, funding, they download content, webinar registrants, event attendees, et cetera. And then what are the problems that they commonly run into as a buyer persona? If you have those three in personalization, it's like, to Jake's point, you just smoked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you do that, you're in the top like 0.5% right now.
Oh yeah, for sure. Which is, it's a little sad to me that that's the case, but to your point, the good news about all of that is to your point, it's really, and I say this with a little bit of hesitance, almost because it sounds to some degree pedantic, but prospecting is really easy. It's really easy when you think about it. You just have to do those four things, and you just stood out from 99.9% repeating, of reps, because they're not. So that's the good news, is you can step over the bar quite easily.
Yeah. Do the three of you have any examples specifically of what worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to kind of jump in and start. I'll give two examples, and I think we'll talk about gifting in particular. What also doesn't pattern interrupt is generic gifting. So just to be very clear, generic send all videos, generic gifting, or start like that also does not work. So 100%. Just to kind of like clear that out for a lot of people, like please don't send me any more socks. I don't want your customized socks. I give them to my 7-year-old. Okay, please, no more custom socks. What works from a gifting standpoint, I'll talk about an iPad campaign. We worked with a iPad waitlist management. They ended up getting acquired by Yelp. And so what did we do? We did a professional video. We preloaded it on an iPad and we shipped it to decision makers. We got a 75% response rate. Why? Patterned it up, super relevant gift, right? And so that was by far, I think, one of the most interesting ones that we've done. Is again, when you're going to pattern disrupt, be smart, be relevant, be clever, right? It's not that we are an iPad waitlist management. So we can spend $400 to get it. Like, it's just, if you really think logically, you'll come to a conclusion of what is that logical gift or idea that you could wrap, not just like a cheesy saying. And then number two, and I briefly touched on this, what we are seeing work again, almost every sector, is one-to-one DM videos on LinkedIn, which is basically if you are a first degree connection, there's a plus button, it's a video button, and you can literally send it like this. It takes 25 seconds. Because again, guess what? Pattern disrupt, and it has to be personalized. There's no way to bulk upload. And so again, the themes there are, it has to actually be relevant to the person you're reaching out to. And again, a little bit of extra work. Everyone always says, how do I make it scalable? Like, it is scalable. You just can't hit send all. Just because you can't hit send all doesn't mean that something's scalable. And so those are two like very real ones that we've done that are, you know, around like gifting and video that we've seen a lot of success with.
I love that quote of just because you can't send all doesn't mean it's not scalable. That's like should be the mantra.
People will be like, how do you scale it? I'm like, scale what, Brendan? Scale results or scale activity? Like,
Exactly.
which one are you talking about? And to the crazy point that you just brought up, I was like, Jake for president. Is people say like, okay, well, they keep going back to activity, which I think is a part of the game. Don't get me wrong. Like, you can't just send one really personalized email and gift and be like, well, I did my job for the day. But I looked up at industry activity metrics, and they were a la Bridge Group and Topo research, 40 dials per day and 30 emails per day for a full-time prospector. And so I'm like, okay, how do I personalize this? Like, I'll take that as scale even. Like, let's put the results aside, you know, that I've seen 4x, 5x, 7x results of personalization. Let's just take that industry activity metric, and I could still get out, you know, 50 emails at minimum per day and 60 calls per day with personalization. So to your point, it's like, think about the things that you're trying to scale, and then how do I scale those up? But Darren, I think he asked a good question. Am I allowed to like hijack the questions in the chat?
Yeah, go for it. Totally.
Allowed to do that. So I think Darren, and you'll have to correct me, he was asking about what are the three things that I talked about including in outreach. Do you mean the 3 parts to relevance or the 3 parts to pattern disruption? I'll cover relevance while you can type, but relevance comes down to their business metrics. What are they trying to achieve? What are the triggers? And then that they're seeing in market or according to a buyer persona, like, did they download content? You know, or did they IPO, company funding, request a demo, didn't schedule one? You know, they just bought tech, for instance, they just integrated tech. Like, heck, here's a competitive play that has worked wildly well. If I want to know who my competitors are working with, go to their LinkedIn page and see who's following them and see who's making comments on all of their posts. And all of a sudden you have a hotbed for people who are likely about to buy them or have already bought them in the past. But that's the second part, is triggers. And then the third part is what problems, business problems, do they normally run into in the day. So I just wanted to answer you. Jake for president.
I can follow on your question, Mikey, around some of the cool things that are. I try to pull a couple of ideas that I've seen from our customers and what they've sent out as just fun, creative ways. And I think the overarching theme of things that I pulled out is kind of creativity. And I think creativity is like a really key skill that SDRs and AEs need to embrace, need to almost practice. And how do you get better at it? You know, and so I think creativity is one of the obvious drivers of a good pattern disruption. But you know, one of the things I saw was an ABM cookbook, which kind of gave you ideas, but in like more of a looking like a cookbook. And there was some really like high-end kitchen utensils along with it. So I felt like there was a very good, like interesting send. I've seen people there, and that was by Terminus. One of our customers, QTS, sent out one of those old school viewfinders, which, you know, if you're, you know, dating yourself, but if you're of age to remember those, then you're like kind of nostalgia. And I think that goes back to other things where nostalgia can be a really good personalization factor. There was another send by Uberflip who created this like game called Content Feud, which was like a kind of a recreation of Family Feud, but with like trivia and stuff. And so again, pretty creative there. There was I like this one. There was like a multi-send where a T-sheet sent seeds and then a week later a watering can. So it's like you're getting into their, you know, brain twice, which I thought was pretty creative. And then the rack of ribs story, people are probably like, what does that mean in the title of this? So this actually came through one of our reps here at Sendoso. We were at a conference about a year and a half back or so, or 2 years ago, and someone was on crutches. and broke his rib. And so the AE followed up and sent a rack of ribs as just like a funny follow-up, which like landed really well and got him a meeting, got him a deal. So
Risky.
risky, but fun. I mean, I think it's like
Yeah.
how personal can that? I mean, they had a personal conversation about
Yeah.
breaking the ribs, and there was a play on like skiing and stuff, but it was like, you know, something that was pretty funny to see being sent.
Yeah, all just examples of relevant, right? Like
Yep.
it's relevant, like every example. And again, like the Terminus one, I think is a really interesting one because, you know, it's not a cookbook isn't Terminus, but the way it's deployed. And I think like, you know, in sales, this is the fun part of the job, being creative and doing these things. If you're just hitting send all, I can get bots to do that. In 5 years, bots are already going to be doing it. And so I just feel like those examples are so good, Kris, because it just, again, like you have to unlock your brain a little bit now, but it's not really different to Beck's point than it was before. And so I just think hopefully everyone listening to this is just like, just spend a little bit of time just being creative and thinking. And even if you're not that creative, go to your peers who are and just steal their best ideas, you know, like that's another strategy that's totally fine. But I just love all those examples.
There's one, and I am never going to advocate of like, hey, this is the best technique, but I will say I've taken one meeting from an SDR since I've been in SaaS, one meeting, and I'll tell you what he did. It was different. And I started trying this. I'm like, oh my goodness. It was like fire, not just response rate, but booked meetings rate is he sent me a message and he said, hey, I've been watching a couple of the videos. Did you know that when I Google your name and flip the script dead on, that your website doesn't come up? So I diagnosed it with my engineer and we think it's because your metadata is off. And so if you'd give us, 15 minutes to explain what we think is going on, I don't know if you're based on lead count, but if you are, then this could be hindering you. So 9 p.m. on a Friday night. So I ping him back and I said, what's your number? He gave it to me and I called him and I said, dude, you can have the keys to my car. And he starts laughing. And I was like, yes, you can have a meeting. I'm like, you just found a problem for me that I didn't know existed. So the fastest way, in my opinion, is to find a problem that prospects are experiencing, and you're going to have to go on overt indicators. So a great example of this is a lot of times whenever I'm selling into deals, I'll request a demo and I'll download content and I'll go in through the chat box and I'll just document my journey. And then I'll do the same to their competitor and I'll document my journey there. How many times did the reps call me? Did they leave a voicemail? How many times they email? How quickly? I don't know if that means that they have a churn problem on their demo request line, but on average, I've been seeing 9 to 25% of people who request a demo actually get a demo because of how bad that process is. And so I usually go into these enterprise, gigs, and in the final presentation, I'll be like, hey, so I requested a demo. And here's my journey. And I'm like, your rep called me once. They sent me one email 8 days later. And I didn't hear anything after that. I did it to your competitor and they sent me 3 emails. Called me 4 times, left a voicemail, added me on social. And then I just shut up and watched the room implode. Watch the room implode. And I think a lot of reps struggle with, especially early on in their career, like, how do I build credibility? I'm so young. Like, how do I build trust with someone? How do I build rapport? And I'm like, rapport is a French term that means to be brought back. And if I had to guess what that means, it's that you're on opposing sides to your prospects. You want to sell more stuff. They want to buy a few amount of stuff. You want to sell at a high price tag. They want to sell at a low price tag. So you have mutually exclusive goals. So you're opposing. And it's restoring yourself back to the side of your prospect of how can I solve their problems? And that puts us on the same team. So it's like, to do that, if you just can find a problem that it generically, to your point, Jake, that they'll have of like relevance is always going to work better than irrelevance. Of like, typically companies are running into this. If you could go check back at your demo request conversion, and if it's anything below 65%, I have an idea on how we could quicken that and increase response rates or increase book meeting rates. But if you can do it for them specifically, the results for booked meetings and closed one is uncanny. So my biggest advice and gifting is going to be a part of that, of like, to your point of like, they ran into something. How can I hook that into, a problem that they're on the business front genuinely experiencing? And then the trust is like, it doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter, all of a sudden you're the one that the expert is the one who tells them things that they don't know. So if you can tell them problems that they have that they didn't know about, all of a sudden they're not questioning your background so much.
Mm-hmm.
Total. One thing going back to what Jake said, and I think this is like a tactical takeaway for the audience and what we're doing here at Sendoso. To your point on like, if you don't have an idea yourself, steal from others. One of the things we've done is we've put in place this like power hour. I mean, it's kind of an age-old concept, but what we do is, the SDRs and AEs, they're prospecting power hours. And then based on how they set that meeting, they're dropping in the call recording so that they can share that conversation. They're dropping in the last email that got that meeting. And so there's a bit of sharing and collaboration and like, ooh, good idea. Or, oh, that's a really good, conversation. I'll steal that line. And I think that can help people, one, celebrate wins, but two, learn from others on the team, which is a great way, especially in this virtual world where in some sales teams, they're not in the sales pit anymore. Back in my day when I was in sales, I would just hear those conversations, on the floor, but you got to be creative now that things are slightly different.
Totally. So we have a question from Sarah in the chat. Jake, I'll direct it at you to kick it off, but have you seen any sustainably focused gifts or outreach that have a positive response?
Well, outreach is just general. So yes. And then gifts, I think that one of the big issues I see with a lot of the things we're talking about, like gifts, videos, is we for some reason, we don't think of it as like a core part of like a sequence strategy or a cadence strategy. And I think that's like the first myth that we need to get rid of, is that when we think about building it's not a campaign, like gifting, and it's not a and I think marketing and sales is like, well, but it's not emails and calls. It's like, no, it's integrated. And so again, I think what we're getting at here, Sarah, for my advice to you would be to say, again, thinking through where would it best fit, right? There's a lot of different areas. Should it be the first touch point? Usually not. Like I can just tell you, like that's our experience. Should it be like a second or third or whatever? Can it be the first if it's super, super relevant? Sure, maybe. But I think it's the companies we see that are doing a good job are not doing the things everyone else is doing. They're not using like, hey, I'll buy you a Starbucks gift card. They're not doing XYZ other thing that's cheap and easy. Instead, they're thinking of how can I be clever, and they're not trying to bribe people either. Hey, if you do this, then I'll do this. But they have it integrated in as just a part of a step for like, certain, like level of sequences. So it's not necessarily like an exact play, but it's more of just more of what we've been talking about, relevancy, and then moving away from the mindset that if something is not an email or call, that it shouldn't be a normal part of a process, versus thinking of gifting and some of these other things as campaigns.
One gift that I saw that worked really well was, and again, this was on me, like, or on the company that I was with, is they shipped, Kris, you might like this. I hope you add it to your highlight reel. It was with Sendoso. They shipped a phone to the leader. They opened it up and it was like, it was a burner phone. It was like pretty cheap, like a $30, $40 phone. And then when they opened it, it rang and it was the rep.
Super creative.
It's like, that's incredible. And to your point, Jake, it's like, think outside of the box. The great news is the box is tiny. We're all using the same freaking words. So it's like, think outside of the box. Always think about being respectful, being brief, being relevant, being personalized, knowing something about them. It's like, there are no rules, other that you're achieving that, and you're not doing this bad list of stuff. Like, think outside of the box, and the world of the possible is like pretty grand out there. So yeah, the rep sent the phone, and this was like a pretty heavyweight within the organization, and they picked up that phone. They were like, this is incredible. This is incredible.
Exactly. And Becc, like that example is so beautiful, because it's like, then why, a company like that should pivot every single thing they're doing. That is their only strategy for X period. Like, I think, again, we get so locked into that. Like, that's a campaign. We think of that as like a campaign. It's like, why are we sending any emails or calls? Like, if this is getting a 80% accept, like a meeting book rate, Why are we doing this other mindless crap? And I think more people, like, again, if you think outside the box and you find things that work, you've got to stop thinking of these things as campaigns and just integrate it as a part of it. It's a perfect candidate for that.
I agree. To answer Sarah's question with a couple other ideas. So one is, I've seen charity donation e-gifts work really well as a way of like a more positive focused send, especially if you do your research and know the recipients interested in, you know, the ASPCA and in animals. And so you can do some donations there. Or if they're more, you know, a woman-owned business and you're highlighting that in terms of your messaging. So I think there's different ways that you can integrate sustainability if that's key to your business, or you want a merchant that has a pledge for sustainability. And then I think it's just super important that you connect that with like what your business is actually, or what the value proposition you're trying to even get a meeting for in the first place. I think just lobbing over an e-gift or lobbing over some sustainable, you know, coffee mug, it is less relevant unless you connect it with bigger messaging.
Nice. Love it. Yeah, I remember the last webinar we did with Sendoso. I believe it was the director of SMB sales that was on. And he told us a story of how he'd been working a deal for a long time and was getting pretty far in the deal cycle, but then went ghosted, right? And didn't have anything. So he got the CEO and the CMO's address and sent them both Nerf guns, like the title, right? And then, you know, they had a Nerf gun fight, and the next thing you know, they send a picture back to him being like, this is the incredible idea. And then the deal continued, right? And then he ended up closing it, right? So I was just like, that's cool. Okay, so we got a couple questions. Jackie is asked in the chat, do you have any creative ideas for commodity sales that's primarily driven by pricing? I'll start with Becc. Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, so I think I actually, and this is gonna sound probably, which maybe it is, ignorant, but I actually prefer when it's a commodity something and like all things are usually equal, because it's really easy to just sell more effectively than other people and prospect more effectively. So I think that these tactics, techniques, different pattern interrupts, like they'll work on, I would say, I'm going to say within the US. I'm going to start there because that's where I'm based and that's where I normally prospect into. I mean, Jake and Kris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but these are techniques that will work for any industry, you know, or any kind of buyer persona. So like, I think one of the myths, for instance, is that like CTOs aren't creative, you know, so they don't like personalization, or engineering isn't creative, so they don't like personalization. Or you can't, you know, joke around or pattern interrupt with a network security architect because, you know, they're a really technical field. And I actually have found the opposite, that they usually don't get personalized emails, and people don't, you know, normally break outside of that pattern, and they think that they're only technical. So long story short, I wouldn't say anything in specific to commodity sales, but I would say apply these. I would shift my mindset. So I think that it will probably likely be easier within commodity sales to use these techniques, because sales reps, regardless of industry, regardless of what they're selling, aren't doing things like this.
Mm-hmm. Kris, Jake, do you have any additional thoughts?
I've been thinking, because I asked her what industry was. I was going to try to come up with one on the fly for her, which is like organic vegetable oils, sunflower, canola. So think about, like, so you're probably selling to wholesalers, right? So you're selling to people or distributors, right? So I would just think about, you know, what does a distributor care about? Well, they care about, you know, more shelf space. They care about increasing their margins. And so again, could you come up with a gift, or like, hey, I know that you represent these products. Do you know what makes this meal better? Is my oil, you know? So I would really just walk through the life of a distributor and then think about what a pattern disrupt option would be. I'm going to think about this more though, because I do want to give you a specific one, but yeah, I think anything Becc said is spot on. Every industry that this is applicable, a pattern disrupt is a pattern disrupt. And, you know, even with all of these, like, you know, ideas we have, there's something in there for you that if you just sit there for a little bit, Jackie, and just think through, like, okay, well, what could I do? Could I just send them sunflower seeds or something? I don't know. But there is something there for you, 100%.
Totally. Awesome. So we got another one from Gianluca, And he's like, consider all these valuable advices. What do you think are the best tools to train / coach the sales team and align them on procedures, sequences, content, and do onboarding of new salespeople? Kris, do you have any thoughts on that one?
So there's a lot of tools out there for kind of learning and training. One that I've heard a lot of success with is Speckit, as like a cool tool that helps with training and enablement. So there you have it.
Becc, Kris, do you guys have any insights or thoughts? Or sorry, Becc and Jake.
We use Speckit too. I mean, we're a partner of theirs, and so we do a lot of deployments of Speckit. It's a really simple and easy tool. There's a lot of packs out of the gate that they have for most core tools. And then, outreach is kind of our go-to with SalesLoft, and some of these other ones as well. So between the two of those tools, you can kind of create a repeatable way for interaction. It doesn't mean it's send all. There's other ways to be repeatable. And then you've got a way to kind of train the reps in the tools that they're already in versus like a wiki. So those are kind of the two that I would kind of couple as a part of that.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is that the shift that I would make for the best, like quote unquote onboarding, is most of the companies that I see, they focus the majority of their onboarding in terms of like training reps, is training them how to use tech or training them how to understand what their company does. I would double, triple, 8x, 10x, 15x down on train them on what your buyer does. I see like these like shady cards at the end of an onboarding deck that's like, oh yeah. And by the way, we forgot to mention our buyers are a marketer and I'm like, this is crazy to me.
It really is.
I would say I would start from an onboarding perspective. I would go back, to all my sales reps, all my SDRs, and say, and this is going to be jarring for you, full disclosure. Like I've sat down with, I would say 95% of the companies that I've, gotten the privilege of working with, I'll just sit down with leadership and say, okay, who do we sell into? We'll be 10 leaders in the room. And after an hour-and-a-half long debate that's blood-filled and heated, we now have a list of who we sell into. So we're not even on the same page there. But once we have that, if your reps can't name the 5 buyers that you sell into, what they're metriced on, meaning they're gold on, what they're hired, fired, promoted, blah, 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 to drive, the problems that they typically run into, and there's only going to be about 3 or 4 main ones, and then like things that are happening in market. If they don't know the metrics, and I would quiz my reps, what is a marketer measured on? And if they don't know that answer is MQL, demand gen marketer is MQL, then like they need to start there, because how can I speak to a marketer with relevance if I don't even know what they're measured on? So people say like, hey, I'll say like from a scale of 1 to 10, how similar is your product offering, or how similar is your value prop from a marketer to a sales leader or to an SDR leader, for instance, across your 4 buyers? And they'll be like, about an 8.5. I'm like, cool. So you now have a metric for how product centric you're selling. On a scale of 1 to 10, you're an 8.5 at product centric selling, which is like the selling no. So I would go back to my reps, and you're going to have to kick up the log, and there's a bunch of spiders that are going to run out. And I would say, hey, can y'all name our buyers? Can you name what they're metriced on? Can you name their top 3 problems? And if not, then we need to start there and have the education process be on, they don't have to learn so many sales tips, tricks, and techniques if they just know through and through what a CTO does. And so it organically comes out throughout the writing.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I'd chime in too on that, John Lucas' question on content, we use HighSpot. That's another tool, or Seismic, that can work well. I know content was a part of your question. And then the last thing I'd say on that topic is just when we first got started, we did like an annual SKO, a sales kickoff. Then we moved it to twice a year. Then we changed it to an RKO and brought in marketing, sales, CX. And now we're going to be doing it 4 times a year. So I think there's value besides just having a software tool to have, the revenue teams get together and, have a more of a multi-day learning session with interesting content, with different workshops, with different, live trainings. So I'm a big proponent of more RKOs than less.
Awesome. And quick plug here. after talking about spec and outreach. Jake's hosting a webinar August 24th, 12 p.m. CT, and there's the link. Just put it in the chat. So go hang out with him again if you want.
Beckett's there too. So if you want to learn,
Yeah.
learn a little bit more, I think outreach, my people at outreach are there too. So all of the above.
Groovy. Okay. One from the Q&A, Adrienne. I think I pronounced that properly. I apologize if I didn't. Are any of you familiar with any biz dev team tools that help keep energy up on SDR teams that work remotely? And she says, I recall a company, maybe Ambition, would play an SDR's theme song on every team's monitor whenever they booked a call. Any other additional tools that you guys are familiar with to help keep SDRs, energy up while working not in the war room?
Another one I've seen is Incentive Pilot.
Yeah, I double down on Ambition. Their gamification platform, they make it fun, but I'm give my quip that no one's gonna like. They're like boring data girl. I'm like, the most fun thing for a team, the most motivating thing for a team is when they're winning.
Yeah.
When they're winning, So, I try to find the techniques, the messaging and the cold call, or the problems for prospects that when you talk about them, they work, and the rest will take care of itself. But yes, Ambition for gamification is a really good platform.
And we've built in winning into our culture above and beyond just like, the sales motion, and that, we're on our all hands, like the SDRs, the AEs, the AMs, all hands, there's one or two that's sharing a win. And so we've tried to take it more than just like, how do you share a win in real time, to like, how do we build that into our culture for lots of different times where, we're really showcasing wins across the entire company too, which helps on the inspirational side that Ambition can help with too.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Okay. I got a decently sized one question here from Sean. So he's been in the wine industry for 8 years, but has just moved to a new role department focused on corporate partners. So he's been doing customizable gift packs and virtual wine experiences, which are slowly becoming in person again. He's been getting better at tailoring his LinkedIn emails, Sales Navigator, and getting much more responses the past couple of weeks. He says the difficult part is figuring out who is the real decision maker, but LinkedIn has helped to look outside of that box into new industry/fields. So outside of LinkedIn, do any of you have any suggestions on other platforms / etc. He should be spending more time prospecting?
I mean, I'd answer this in a couple different ways. One, I'd say there's other tools like ZoomInfo, which, help you map out, the account. And if you're trying to figure out your decision maker, which sounds like the real problem here, there's things you can do even within LinkedIn too, and things that we've seen work well, where you don't always have to go straight to the decision maker first. You could purposefully go much below the line and even talk to, like in our case of Sendoso's case, we might go out and reach out to an AE, knowing that they're not going to be the buyer of Sendoso, but they'd be a user that would benefit from it. We get some intel, build some rapport, and then, ask, hey, who would be the right person to actually buy this? And so there's tactics like that can be used to, make sure you're not always just hitting up that VP, but getting intel, partner selling and using a tool like Crossbeam and figuring out who of your partners already knows this account intelligence can be also super useful as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have one suggestion and one piece of tech that might help, or two pieces of tech that might help. The suggestion would be, if I were you, Sean, is this for outbound or inbound? I'm going to guess that it's outbound, but if you could answer that.
So.
For outbound, I would either way. I would go into my CRM of choice, and I would look for outbound deals. And this, I hadn't done this as a leader when it was suggested to me. I would look at or analyze closed won for the deals that we closed won on outbound. What was the first person that we started with? What was the level of their title? and what was the discipline of their title. Because I think there's a lot of theory of reps of who's the best person to go after, meaning in terms of decision maker, and really all you're trying to do is drive conversion. So I would look at the level of title and the discipline of their title for all of your closed won, and let the data do the talking of who the best person is to reach out to. Because from my point of view, I looked back yesterday, and 82% of the deals that I've closed since I've been at Flip the Script, I did not start with the decision maker, nor see the decision maker, meaning the person who signed on the dotted line the entire cycle. I had to introduce myself on the DocuSign. So point being, I think there's a lot of myth that you have to have the SVP, the CRO of the universe at Oracle for them to sign. And I'm like, yo, the CRO over at Oracle, not that they have one, especially if you hunt up market, senior managers can have budget, but a CRO is going to delineate out any tech purchase, to their teams, to a sales enablement team, or to, someone else to go check out. So my biggest suggestion would be to look in your CRM and see from an outbound perspective, who is the smartest starting point. And I would do per segment, SMB, mid-market, general business, growth, and then enterprise, and see who the smartest person was to talk to at first. But 2 platforms that might help. If your product-led growth, Groundswell can help, trigger interesting moments. Like if you, sent 15 gifts or et cetera, then they could highlight that person to you. So kind of to Kris's point, even if it's a lower level, quote unquote, this is someone who is solving the problem that they need to solve for using your tech already. And then user gems helps on trigger moments of if someone's a current customer and goes to another account, that is within territory, and they'll even update their email address and their direct dial if it changes. So that's a good way to kind of like expansion sell, but they change to another account. Those are 2 pieces of tech that might help.
One other thing to add there that I've seen as a fail when looking at decision makers, going too high and asking too much. It's like with the CEO like myself too, I'll get prospected and be like, hey, here's what we do. Can we meet? And I'm like, no, can't meet
tomorrow. Do you have time in the next day or 2?
But I have seen people use techniques where it's like, hey, I'm working with XYZ on your team. Here's why they're evaluating us. If you're curious, let me know. And it's more of a soft CTA. And then I'm like, actually, I'm kind of curious. You sparked my interest, but you're not directly asking me to jump on a meeting in a, really canned, way. And so I do think you can go a way above the line to Mike Kenny's book. I've read that, and have a different talk track, which is more of an informative, hey, C-level, we're talking to these people about that. So when the deal gets to their desk, they're not surprised, but you don't need to go ask for meetings for 15-minute time slots to C-levels minute 1. And if you don't get a response, move on. Like that's bad.
There's another play to your point that we've done. And Kris, I want to get your perspective on this. That was really successful at my last organization was the CXO pass down play.
Mm-hmm.
That I would basically go to Kris, give him a quip, give him a piece of content or a gift, and directly ask for the pass down to VP of sales and identify the person for him.
Yes.
Because I'm like, Kris, do you like helping other people in general?
Yes.
Do you like spending a lot of time doing it?
No. Time piece.
Right. So the easier, Kris wants to help, but he doesn't want to spend the legwork that you should be doing as a rep to do it. So I'd identify the person you want to talk to. What do you want to talk to them about? And basically ask them for the pass down, and they would pass down all day long. And then VP of sales gets an email from Kris and they're like, crap, my CEO
That's right.
wants me to jump on the line. And so they jump on the line, all the time. So that's another play that can work really well.
Yeah, we've actually done data around that. Like the number, we did a survey of like 200 something decision makers. This is a couple of years ago. And the number one reason that someone took a meeting is my boss told me to. Number one reason.
Kris has, he's the final word. If Kris told me to take a meeting, I would take a meeting.
Yeah, of course.
Totally. Because it's like, it's to your point that you're like, yes, I'm going to assume that they find value. If they want me to spend their time, my time, which they're paying for, to jump on the phone, they think it's a smart idea, number 1. But number 2, like, that's my boss or my boss's boss's boss who's telling me to do something. So I'm going to jump on the line. I didn't know you had data on that, Jake. That's great.
Yeah,
that's great data.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So just we'll go through a couple more questions and then I'll let you guys give a bit of time back for you guys. But Mike's asking, he's like, this may be a rookie / Dumbo question, never a dumb question. What is the best channel to send a customer gifts? Well, one would be Sendoso through, and would you recommend pre-introducing the gift through an email before sending it?
I'm confused maybe with what the best channel to send a gift through would be. Like, is it like a offline versus email, but like LinkedIn? I think,
E-gift, I think it's e-gift is maybe
Yeah.
what he's talking about.
okay.
Yeah, I think that's
It means like LinkedIn, email.
Again, going back to like Jake's earlier point of like, you have to think about this as a fully integrated strategy, and you should be like designing your sequences with multi-touch throughout the entire process. And so I don't think there's like a golden answer to this. It's like, as long as it's coming within the cycle and there's, before and after follow-ups and it's thoughtful and it's personalized and relevant, I think you can win. I think there's some things like if you just send someone a bunch of swag and they've never heard of you day one, that's like maybe a no-no. But the other points to that question are really, what else are you sending in that sequence? I need to know a lot more to answer that in a very like educated manner. But my blanket answer would be to really think holistically about the entire buyer lifecycle and thoughtfully each touch.
Yeah, most of the e-gift stuff I see is it's spam. It's really just another version. It's like people asking me for 15 minutes of my time to buy me coffee, and they'll send me a whatever. And it's like, do you know what my hourly, like and not to, be conceited, but it's like, do you know what my hourly rate is? Do you know what my time's worth? Like, and you're going to buy me a $5 Starbucks? Like, most of the e-gifts I see are pretty garbage. So I think if you're going to do it again, be thoughtful, be novel, be clever, and then do what Kris said, which is, make sure it's integrated as a part of it.
It's something that's worked really well for me. And so everyone's clear on the line, I will accept $5 gift cards from Starbucks. And you can also send it to me. I love Starbucks.
If you give it to me, I'll do it.
Sour gummies, cookies, brownies, no booze. No booze. I've got a closet full of alcohol. Anywho, point being, something that's worked really well for me in terms of timing is, I would guess, and Kris, you can update me on this, and I think it'd be interesting. Most people that I've seen will send a gift at the beginning of a sequence, and I flipped it to the end when I was sending my breakup email. So my breakup email is actually my strongest performer in terms of book meetings and response. Guess I know how to break up well. And I send them a gift then, like they're not giving me like, quote unquote, breaking up is a chance to display exactly who you are, for the better or the worse, And so when I'm giving them a gift, when they knowingly did not give me what I wanted, which was a meeting, that threw gas on the fire. So in terms of sequencing, the other thing that might help with is, this sounds very strategic of me. People are going to question who I am after this. But I'm like, if I have 100 people in a sequence, and let's say let's just say hypothetically, I can only send 10 gifts. I want to see who the first email is good enough to trigger the meeting. Second email is good enough. Third email is good enough, or fourth email is good enough. And I want to save my 10 gifts for the people that none of my first 4 emails worked for. So I would pick the people at the end of the sequence, and that drove a lot of results for me, whether that be e-gifts or not. But and another thing with you could do with Sendoso is no-show rates. People don't think about those a lot, or at least it lost track of or it fell out of the back of my brain. But industry no-show rates that I've seen is around 15% for email, double that for a cold call. So high likelihood, because I think it's a false objection. They're like, yeah, sure, Friday night.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Please hang up. Please hang up.
Yeah, like get out of jail free card. But if you send like a Starbucks gift card to me and to your prospect the day of your meeting or the day before, of like, hey, so you can stay awake in the meeting. Here's a $5 Starbucks gift card. Then that can decrease no-shows, because they know that you're investing. The more time, your resources, and personalization is a part of that, of like, I'm spending my time on you, that you invest in someone, the more likely, they are to say, okay, I can return this time investment, by matching it.
Yeah. And what about current customers too? It's like, we're so obsessed with new, right?
I know.
It's like, how about you take care of your current customers, or maybe as a part of a growth sequence, you know, where you're trying to make new contacts, you can use it there too. So I think we sleep on some of those use cases too, for sure.
Expansion sell, cross sell, upsell, resell, renewal. The companies that do that well. And it's like, and I'll see CS reps, if there are any CS reps online, they like send a gift in like November. I'm like, Brendan, the renewal's up in December. The prospect knows what you're doing. Start in January, bro. Like,
yeah, haven't heard from you in like 3 months, but like, hey, here's a gift.
All
here's the contract.
and here's Brendan at Thanksgiving, you know? So I'm like, I made it a part of my reps for CS reps, for any kind of expansion selling teams, like put it in your calendar, send them a gift in January and March, in June. So when the renewal comes up, they already know that you value them, you know? So it's not so like, like, please renew. Here's some muffins, please renew. You know?
Totally. I could go on for, like, timing is just as important as the item itself. So, yeah.
Totally. Okay, guys. Well, we got 3 minutes till the top of the hour. I want to give you a bit of time to prep for your next meeting or whatever it is coming up. But I want to make one more plug here. Beck's going on her Flip the Script tour.
Kris.
What's that?
Kris is going to be there too.
Exactly. Fantastic. That's starting October 17th. So the pre-reg link is in the chat. So, you know, go sign up and come hang out with us again, you know. But without further ado, I just want to thank you three so much for giving us the hour of your time and sharing all of this information with the community. I learned so much. So again, thank you three so much. And I really look forward to doing it again soon. And thank you, Sendoso, for sponsoring this event. It's been super informative. And if there's any questions that we didn't get to, go follow the three of these guys on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any burning questions. So again, thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your early Friday.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, Becc. Thanks, Kris.
Thanks, Jake.
See you guys.
See y'all.